To our weekly Data Talk, a show where we talk to data science leaders from around the world. And super excited today. We're talking about why collaboration is the future of data analytics, and excited to talk with Adam Weinstein. He is the CEO and co-founder of Cursor, which is a data search and analytics hub used by teams at all these top organizations like Apple, Slack, Cisco, and many, many others. He previously led analytics at LinkedIn, which we'll talk about. And he was also the first business intelligence team member at ExactTarget way back in the day. Adam, thank you so much for being our guest today.
Hey, thanks for having me. Really excited to be here.
So, Adam, we always start these shows about just getting to know our guest and kind of like their journey that led them to where they are today. So can you kind of just share with us, like going back to school and then like your history?
Sure, totally. Yeah, so I've always kind of been a little bit of a Jekyll and Hyde. So if you go back to, I guess, college days, right? I started off in computer science. I was a total geek growing up, right? Take everything apart, put it back together, break it again, learn how to fix it. But I quickly realized that I was kind of missing, the application aspect of it. I mean, I think in early 2000s, even computer science was extremely theoretical, and to this day still remains so. But I was missing the, okay, what do I do to actually apply all of this knowledge piece of life, and a little bit of socialization too. So I ended up double majoring in business and computer science at Purdue. Purdue was founded as an engineering school, so it was actually industrial management, which was more of a, how do you help build things? If you're building a car, how do you manage the assembly line?
Oh, wow. And
it paired very well with a more technically focused discipline like computer science. So in industrial management, computer science, and out of school, like every sort of, I guess, undecided, recent undergrad, ended up becoming a consultant. So got to marry both of those two things together. And so I kind of found this opportunity to say, okay, how do you apply technology to solve business problems, make things, as I kind of used to say, better, faster, cheaper? Something I always used to do growing up, whether it was, fixing the neighborhood, computer or that kind of thing.
Nice.
And so I continued down that path, and consulting ultimately led me into early stage tech, because you got to see all these problems at scale inside big companies, and all you wanted to do is go back to the beginning and be there when they first started. But yeah, it was a little bit of both, right? Finding an opportunity to play deep in tech, but also to see how that actually applies in business world.
So, so you did some consulting. Were you thinking about going back to school, or were you like, I want to stay in the career field?
Yeah. So was at Deloitte out of school as a consultant. Debated the MBA path. I think after seeing sort of life at early stage, which, I mean, I was in Chicago at the time, and loved life there. It wasn't quite the tech hub at the time that it is today, even. But as it so happened, and we'll talk about this in a minute, but ExactTarget was a company that was starting in Indianapolis, where I grew up. And cool thing there was that I saw, okay, here's a young company, needed someone with sort of background that I had, and I did the math, and I'm like, okay, well, I can go get an MBA, spend 2 years of my life doing that, come out and probably have a promotion compared to where I am today, or I can go spend those same 2 years at an early stage company and kind of get a school of hard knocks education, which at the time I made that decision, and I'm really glad that I did. So debated going back to school, but I think anymore, unless your goal is to be in a position that requires that type of degree, would strongly encourage anybody to go try something, really young, really early. Learn by doing, and helps you figure out what you want to do in life too. But that's what I ended up doing as opposed to going back to school.
Yeah, because it's hard, like when especially you're so young and you have so many different options. And so sometimes you're like, why get stuck into a program where I may not even want to continue down this path?
Yeah, no, couldn't agree more, right? It's if you go back to that phase of life, right, in school, it's like, okay, well, 2 more years of school sounds fun from a social perspective.
Yeah.
But professionally, it's I don't think there's much you can do better than joining a really young company that, still trying to figure out what it wants to do when it grows up and being a part of that process.
Yeah, and to your point, like it depends. Like some people know what they want to do. They know they want to get their MBA, or they know they want to go to law school, like whatever. Like some people know where they want to go, but a lot of us, like me, I was an English lit major, and I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to get my master's in English lit. I have no clue. So yeah, you're so impressionable at that age. But I love your advice for those that are not sure. Like, hey, you're young, you're smart, you just got out of school. You can learn a lot by joining a startup.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like consulting in a way to me was an opportunity to see a bunch of things very quickly. So I was fortunate at Deloitte to not be stuck on, say, one project for 2 years, but get to be on smaller engagements that lasted, say, 6 to 8 weeks on average. And what that sort of afforded me is a view into the world of all these different types of both functions within organizations. I got to see marketing teams, CIO, CTO organizations, finance organizations, and technology problems within each of them. I think had I not had that experience, it might have been a little bit different. I think, where I ended up, where I went next. But I think of a startup in the same way, right? It's an opportunity to see a bunch of things really fast. And hopefully one of those strikes a nerve and says, okay, this is something I really want to do for the rest of my life. School affords that same thing, right? It's like, okay, you can study all these different areas of whether it's literature or computer science or medicine or whatever it may be. You get to see a bunch of different areas. I doubt people go into law school thinking they want to do constitutional law or tax law or whatever it may be, but eventually you study it and you're like, wow, that's really fascinating to me, and it becomes something you want to continue on down the road.
And you have that unique background in academia of having both the business side and the computer science side, which sometimes is split up. Like some people focus on the computer science side and are brilliant. So it's, you have that, I guess, that double benefit of like, you're good at business, you understand the business problems and addressing business issues, but then you have the computer science background, and you're able to marry those together, which led you into like business intelligence.
Yeah, it was interesting. Like I think those that know me probably joke about me on the business side more than anything, right? It's like you're sort of weighed down by, I wouldn't say business is the weaker of the 2 degrees, but the more, arts focused of the 2 degrees, right? The more scientific your discipline, I guess the more it tends to brand you, right? And so, I think when I go write code here on the team or do anything that's, more technical than say, getting on a call or something, right? There's always a little bit of air that comes out of the room, like, whoa, he just committed something. Is that really going to work? He's the business guy. He's not supposed to do that. So yeah, no, it's fun. I do miss, I think over time I've lost, a little bit of the ability to dive super into the weeds, right? I try not to. I try to really refresh it often, just so I don't. But if you wanted me to go write a MIPS assembler library or piece of code, right, I probably would have to start on Google, right, before I even knew where to went. But luckily, most application programs are at a higher level these days.
Don't we all start on Google?
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Stack Overflow, Google. Yeah, they've got a solid business going for them.
Yeah, it's so funny. Whenever I call like IT support, before I call IT support to help, I'll just Google it, because I was reading all these forums and Reddit about people that work in IT support, and they're all like, I go to Google first.
Yeah, I worked in that through college a little bit, and there's some truth to that. This was as Google was coming about, but still, sometimes Google indexes things better than internal content.
That's so true. Oh my gosh, that is so true. So so tell me about so you went to ExactTarget, and what were you doing? You're doing business intelligence.
So I actually started there as a sales engineer for the first few months. The first few months that I was there, it was really fascinating, right? So ExactTarget, now the largest emailer I think in the world, right? It's part of Salesforce, it's Salesforce Marketing Cloud. The idea was basically, if you were a small to medium sized business and you needed to send out emails, how did you do so in a permission based way? CAN spam had just sort of had been enacted. Companies didn't have tooling to help with that, and then also to help personalize messaging, right? So, this is a true story, right? So if Nike was a customer, I'm sure still is a customer of ExactTarget, I like certain types of tennis shoes. You may like different types of tennis shoes. How do we make sure that the content of that message is appropriate for what each other likes? And so ExactTarget had built a system to help with that. And I think when I left, they were sending upwards of 1 billion messages a day. So it's a huge amount of emails. But I got there, mid 2017. Company, knock on wood, was a rocket ship, and it actually filed to go public at the end of 2017. Or sorry, 2007, not 2017, 2007, both. So challenge was the financial markets were about to implode. And we had done so well, we didn't actually have a good grasp on our own data. So we were selling the product. Generally speaking, it was being metered by the number of emails that a company would send. So you would pay more if you sent 100 million emails a year versus if you sent 2 million emails a year. And we had no idea when a company would be about to go over. Like, we literally weren't paying attention. We were like, okay, you say you're going to send 100 million. That's great. We'll take a look as you get close to your renewal. If you sent 50 million the first week, we wouldn't call you back and say, okay, time to buy more. Simple things like that, where we were just losing opportunity. And so, I jumped from being a sales engineer, which was the problem at the time, was just how do you get big companies to latch onto this product, right? We had small to medium-sized businesses, but if you go to a Nike or a Bank of America or an Expedia, or these really large organizations with very different procurement processes, they sort of wanted an ex-consultant to come in and bundle that up and sort of explain that, not to mention put together a demo that sort of spoke their language. So I jumped from being a sales engineer to the BI team that was being formed at the time. We had no product in place, right? There was no reporting, no nothing. We used business objects, I think, was our first sort of environment, which I think sounds a little dated today, but it did the trick. And that was the beginning of that, right? At first, it was internally focused. Eventually, it became something customers could see. And yeah, that was the beginning of that.
So so you kind of from the ground up were there at the start for business intelligence, and that was that like a new kind of concept back then?
I wouldn't say it was new. It's funny, business intelligence. Today I think most people would call it just pure analytics. The consulting firms of the world, having been at one of them, I can admit that this is a thing. Every couple of years they rebrand something, right? I mean, if you go to even cloud computing, right, there was ASP or application server page, right? Like there are phrases that have been around for a number of years that effectively mean the same thing, but that just get rebranded for marketing purposes. So BI, I think, had maybe come around as a term, but reporting and building data warehouses, those things go back to the 70s. The ease in which you could do them, very, very different, right? I think you needed true engineers, and it would take many, many weeks or months to get something off the ground. Tools like business objects took many months or maybe even years, actually, a better way to put it, down to a few weeks. Today, you've got tools like Tableau or Power BI, that kind of thing, in that realm that can take things down to a couple of hours or even less. So the timeline has shrunk over the years, but the result is more or less the same.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, it's interesting how these like terms develop over time. Even the term like data science, which is constantly evolving, but became like whatever the sexiest job. You see all those headlines about data scientists, but that role has been in existence, just not called that.
Yeah, no, totally agree. It's data science, I feel like, brings in a whole new level of scientific understanding maybe to traditional quote unquote BI. But yeah, there's now, I think, a spectrum of data science, right? Where on one end, you've kind of got what I think a lot of folks are calling like a citizen data scientist, which probably before was just a business analyst, probably lived in BI, building reports, generating specs for reports, interpreting data, that kind of thing. And at the end of the spectrum, you've got, PhDs in nuclear physics that are, writing code and doing all kinds of really impressive, machine learning models, that kind of thing. All sitting on this data science spectrum, but yeah.
So tell me, Adam, about your transition over to LinkedIn.
Sure. So in between, ExactTarget and LinkedIn, I moved out west to a company called Bright. I actually had started of all things, a greeting card company that I ran for a couple of years. We grew it and ended up selling it to a company called Designer Greetings. One of the investors.
I got to ask you. So
Sure.
What led you to go into greeting cards? This is fascinating to me.
Yeah, it's definition of ironic, right? You're the largest, electronic goods, or email sender in the world, and you go start a paper goods company. So I was always this little sarcastic, pain in the rear card sender in the family. So if there was a birthday or a wedding or a kid had been born, I would always send some sort of card that was, I guess, rather embarrassing or sometimes even insulting. And I was traveling a ton for work and failed to find any good card stores. I was actually out in San Francisco a bunch. And long story short, wanted a way to go online and do it myself. This whole notion of print on demand had just come about. This was like 2008, 9. HP had bought a company called Indigo that let you literally print, cardstock quality. Like they'd print on a, Heidelberg one at a time. And so just for the heck of it, I while I was still at ExactTarget on the side, I started building this little tool, as I called it at the time. They would let me pick a design, customize the inside because my handwriting was terrible, and then have it printed and mailed. We didn't buy the press. We went to a third party that would print them every night at 6 p.m. Had a few friends start using it. Decided, okay, maybe there's a business here. And ExactTarget had gotten to about 1,000 employees, so it got big, and which was a great thing. And I moved 2 blocks away, really far, clearly, and started in Crete. So yeah, we grew in Crete for a while. Never raised any money, just bootstrapped it, which was a crazy experience. And yeah, that was kind of fun. So, but yeah, moved out west. One of the investors that in ExactTarget had invested in this company, Bright, ExactTarget was based in Indianapolis. The investors in Indianapolis, Bright was out in San Francisco, and I met the founder and CEO of Bright on a Memorial Day of 2012, I think it was. And they're like, hey, there's a job here. You should come in and help us figure out data. We don't know about title and all that stuff, but why don't you come in a couple of weeks? So within 2 weeks, I literally moved. Now I was 7 months married at the time. Moved, wife and me out west. I think it was a little bit of a what the heck are we doing kind of moment. And Bright was a great ride, right? So Bright was in the space of helping job seekers find jobs, but our twist was that we had an algorithm we had built that would match a job to a resume. So instead of looking for a job title, hey, I want to be a software engineer or a product manager or a marketing manager, we could take a resume, basically infer what that person was good at, and then identify jobs that were effectively the inverse, right? So what that person was looking for in a requisition. And we made money by going to employers and saying, okay, what are you looking for? Here are all the qualified candidates in the market. Got the thing up to 8 million job seekers a month looking on Bright to look for a job. And ultimately LinkedIn bought it in 2014 to help with relevance internally at LinkedIn. So they were growing their jobs business at the time. And then also I think because we had a pretty impressive team.
That's cool.
So that's
were you guys like one of the first doing that?
I think we were. I certainly don't know of any others at that point in time, right? There have been other products that have come out since then that focus on that matching aspect of jobs to resumes in different ways, right? Some of it's for the sake of identifying talent internally that might be a fit for a new role. Some of it's for the sake of hiring, like Bright did. I think it's still, it's gotten considerably better. Both the team at LinkedIn that came from Bright has really improved on that algorithm, given the data LinkedIn has, as well as some of the opportunities in the market have grown as well.
I think it's so smart, that product, because it kind of reminds me of like those online dating, algorithms where like they match people together based on the data that they have on each individual.
You're right. Funny enough, eHarmony actually got in the space for a brief while. So the founder of eHarmony, you can go back and look. He wanted to take his approach and try to go out and become a job business. And I don't think it exists anymore. I believe they shut it down not that long ago, but they tried it for a good 4 or 5 years. It's a crowded space.
Yeah, and much needed, obviously. And the fact that LinkedIn purchased Bright, saw like the opportunity there, and obviously all the algorithms and things that you had developed was much needed by LinkedIn. So when LinkedIn purchased Bright, what then happened with your role?
With me, yeah, I was the odd man out in some sense, right? So I was this little one-man data band, or there was a small group of us, right? LinkedIn had a 250 person, I think a 220 person team at the time, focused on analytics and data science. So I became one of those folks. And it was interesting. Like at first they're like, okay, what do we do? There was a group called Business Operations and Analytics within that was kind of a catch-all. I kind of joked we were a SWAT team, but really we did special project work within the organization. And within like 3 or 4 weeks of getting there, LinkedIn had just announced that they were building a team in China, building a subsidiary in China, actually. So, and if you know anything about sort of doing business in China, like we were treating it in a very independent way. So it was to be autonomous in operation. It was technically set up in such a way that it could be divested if we ever wanted it to be. We didn't even have 100% ownership of it. I think Sequoia China owned a percentage of it, if I remember right, and that's required just to be able to do business there. And they're like, okay, who can go set up from the ground up, an operations and data team there? And I got one of those like, Adam looks. And so all of a sudden I started going back and forth on a plane every 6 weeks to China. And this is sort of where the idea from Cursor came from. So part of the goal was to help transfer a lot of the knowledge that we had at headquarters in Mountain View to the team in China that we were both hiring and trying to educate simultaneously. And so I was, relatively new there. I'd been there like 4 or 5 weeks at that point, and started to ask, okay, so where do we keep, metrics that we look at, and the code behind them, so that we can sort of teach not just necessarily what the outcome is, but how the sausage is made. And we didn't have any single place for that, right? If you're an engineer, you've got code in a repository, it's in Git, it's in some sort of code management system. In analytics, so much of the work is very ad hoc. Someone has a question on a marketing campaign or on a, on some sort of initiative that's ephemeral or short-term in nature. There's not often a place where that work is kept. It's like, okay, here's your result in an email and a dashboard in a, in a model of some sort. And all the sort of legwork that went into that doesn't necessarily get put in any sort of searchable repository. So I think I had somewhere in the neighborhood of a couple hundred coffees with folks around the organization, just to like build this, and it was not all at once, but it was over the course of these trips. I was going back and forth every 6 weeks. And I sort of became this or I should say the notes that I had became this repository that became really useful to the business. And so realizing that we had a problem, and I thought we were pretty technically savvy as an organization, I thought, hey, maybe other big companies have this issue. So tucked it away in the back of my head for a while, right? And about 2.5 years later, that's what became Cursor. So how do you capture knowledge inside analytics organizations? Whether it's SQL code that's written, whether it's, hey, I've got 8 different dashboarding systems because I'm a big company, and marketing uses one and sales uses another, and finance uses a third one. And how do I search across all of them? Or just from an institutional knowledge perspective, like, hey, we've got a bunch of really smart people doing really intelligent work. Why am I letting this live on their local machine so that if they move, take a vacation, leave the company, that work, goes up in smoke? And so that was step one.
Yeah, and you realize this problem that's happening in businesses. And I remember back in the day, I used to work very closely with web development teams, and an employee leaves, and like all that knowledge about how they developed the website or certain code is gone. And if they didn't have any notes anywhere, like the new developer would have to like learn from scratch, like how to fix something.
Yeah, knowledge management is a fascinating area. Both, in analytics, certainly, personally, but beyond that, how you can apply AI to make it painless to keep track of what's been done in a not intrusive way, right? Historically, if you go back to whether it's Documentum or SharePoint or some of these older tools, or even just wikis that a lot of companies use today, it requires extra effort to say, okay, I'm going to pause, go document the work that I did, and then go back to what I was doing, right? And if you're a in-demand person, which all of us are, that rarely happens. Like you don't find the time to do that, and so the company loses out. So finding a way to either behind the scenes do it automatically with tooling that's designed for that, which Cursor is, I guess, for analytics, or potentially to have some sort of AI process running in the background that can do it separately but without user interaction. I think is a huge opportunity for companies, and will be something that I see AI being used for down the road.
So can you talk about Cursor and how businesses are using it right now?
Sure, sure. So Cursor's sort of designed for two audiences, right? So on one hand, you've got this analytics function that analysts, if I think of them as that, or data scientists, they're scattered around organizations most often, right? So there's usually a couple in marketing, there's a couple in finance, there's a couple in operations, or maybe even a sales operations team that has some folks that use data in a fun way. But the challenge is there's no connective tissue between all those groups, even though they're using the same data oftentimes, or pieces of the same data. They may not even know each other exists inside certain size organizations, and that some of that's intentional in banks, but oftentimes it's not. It's just org charts.
Yeah.
And so the first use case that I see companies using Cursor today is just building a collaboration layer amongst those folks. So if someone in finance is trying to build a financial forecast of sales of a product, this is a real use case, right? And someone in sales operations is trying to forecast quarterly pipeline of that same thing. They should talk to one another, right? Because it's really the same model, it's the same data, just for different audiences. One might have a different level of flexibility, right? A pipeline might have a high bar, and a financial forecast might be more conservative, but it's a different dial of the same model. So we see a lot of analysts scattered throughout organizations using the product in different groups, and using it to share code, to share insights, to share understanding of data that they're both using. So that's kind of first use case, right? Is how do analytics teams work together, share knowledge? How does the institution benefit from capturing that? And how do you build a catalog effectively of that work, such that any analyst, whether they're new to the company and started yesterday, or they've been there forever and just trying to understand something that they haven't necessarily touched before, can benefit from. The second audience and sort of use case is business users. And so if you really think about what an analyst or data scientist does, it's oftentimes something that's driven by the business that is asked of them. And so there's a cost to a marketing manager asking their data scientist or analyst, hey, where can I find this report? Can you make it look like this? Can you update this or refresh this for this quarter? You did it last quarter. And so how do you enable self-service of that to a business user? So if you've got this great catalog and it's got everything from tables and databases to dashboards that have been produced and code in between, what level of self-service can you enable for that business user to hopefully allow the analyst to focus on the actual making of things, as opposed to the sort of customer service call center kind of, hey, yeah, here's a link to that report that I know, but there's no necessarily place to search to find it. So that business user use case is growing. I think it requires an analytics team to be on the platform and to be producing content. They're sort of the seed, if you will. And once the tree is grown, then you get the business user that can come in and look for what they want. And that'll be, in the long run, more of our focus, right? How we help enable the business as a whole to know more about data inside the organization.
You mentioned artificial intelligence as something that could help also improve collaboration in the future. Are you guys looking into AI, or are you already using AI?
Using some lightweight. I think I use the term delicately because I want to make sure that I'm applying it properly, as opposed to just saying, hey, of course we use AI. But yeah, the more we learn about both what people are doing. So say I'm in the finance organization of a large company, and my focus is on European transport, European transfer pricing or something like this, right? Understanding what a persona is for each individual on the platform, and what they're both knowledgeable about, and what they're typically looking for, is something that we're using and sort of modeling around. So if we can know that, hey, that Adam's a European transfer pricing guy, and there's a new set of data that's coming in that has valuable knowledge around that, we want to alert that person that, hey, this is something that's useful to you. At the same token, if someone's looking for something and they can't find the answer they're looking for, and again, there's something that comes in that's relevant, how do we identify how to match those two together? And then the other piece that becomes interesting is, the more things that get put into the platform, the bigger the catalog gets, the more sort of junk, I guess, that ends up there, right? The old joke was, okay, how many things in your company are called sales report? There's a Salesforce report, there's 25 Tableau dashboards, there's 30 things in your old BI system that you haven't quite deprecated yet. Like, it's everywhere. And so when someone goes to look for, inevitably, sales report, which one do you surface?
Right.
So there's some effort there to look at, how do you calculate relevance, right? And a lot of that is AI-ish in nature, right? But yeah, that's where we focus today. There's also the effort around, do we build tooling to support AI work? Today we're probably more heavily focused on sort of the BI aspect of things, and we will build more of that data science type workload support in the near future.
I think what I find really cool about Cursor, and for those that are listening to the podcast, check out Cursor, cursor.com, to see use cases and different ways Cursor is being used in different organizations like Apple, Slack, Cisco, et cetera. You address one of the big business problems, which is like the silos that happen in organizations, and people aren't talking to each other. And like you mentioned, they might be using the same data warehouse, pulling the same sorts of data, but they're not communicating with each other. And a tool like Cursor can really bring teams together. So can you describe just kind of quickly or briefly, like, how does that collaboration happen? How do people begin to see, hey, you're in sales, I'm in product development, we should be collaborating in some fashion within this tool?
Sure. So it's actually funny. We mentioned Slack earlier, right? Slack is sort of a model, I feel like, for how we've tried to enable that experience. So when you register for Cursor today, anybody can go download it and use it for free to start, right? Where as an early company, we're really looking for feedback for how we can grow things quickly. And so Slack had a similar approach, right? You can go set up a Slack instance for anything, right? We could create one for DataTalk if we wanted to, and when you first arrive, you basically can see everything, right? So if you and I both set up an instance of Slack, same with an instance of Cursor, we could share anything amongst each other. We could also create groups and say, okay, I'm the finance organization, and things get locked down to us. But the idea is to keep the lines of communication as open as possible. And what we've done is separate what something is from the actual data. So if there's a report called sales report, we will expose what it is, and we think that that's what you're looking for. But the actual underlying data is still guarded by the permission that's required to see that. So if it's a Tableau dashboard, you still need permission to Tableau to actually see the data. But we'll say, hey, this is what you're looking for. It's in Tableau. Click here. If you don't have credentials, then here's how you get them. So we've sort of created this somewhat Chinese firewall, if you will, of separating data from metadata and helping users find answers in that way, but trying to really push the boundaries of what's visible in an organization. So if things currently, you wouldn't know that something exists because you don't have access to the system. Okay, we'll let you know that there's a system there and there's an answer there. We won't necessarily let you see it because that's a security no-no. But we will let folks know that it exists. So that's our sort of default mantra, and that's how we've really enabled a lot of collaboration inside company, is by just sort of, for lack of a better phrase, even though it's corny, liberating what's already there. And then a lot of the sort of alerting and conversational components of it. So, I see a dashboard, it's called sales report, it looks really useful, I can comment on it, and the comment goes to anybody that's interested. Hey, this should really be called XYZ, that kind of thing.
Nice. So we're coming to the end of the show. Adam, where can people learn more about you, your work, connect with you, and then also with if people are interested in learning more about Cursor for their business, or even wanting to work for Cursor?
Sure. Yeah. No. I mean, like you said earlier, cursor.com is our website, and feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Corny plug from old and very loved employer. So happy to chat there. Or you're welcome to even throw my email out, right? It's adam@cursor.com if there's anything I can help with. We are hiring, so if anyone's interested, feel free to shoot us a note.
And then one more question we get from our data science community all the time. We have data scientists who are looking to kind of break in. Do you have any tips for them as they're beginning their job search or maybe even applying at Cursor?
Yeah, I mean, I always think that we live in a really incredible time, and this wasn't the case even just 5 to 10 years ago. Go tinker and explore. I was reading an article the other day. I mentioned I was in Chicago at a school at Deloitte about a guy. I think his name was Matt Chapman. He did a bunch of freedom of information requests to the city of Chicago. He got all the parking ticket information, analyzed it using open source tools, and figured out that if you just installed a sign in like 3 different places, you'd reduce the number of parking tickets by like 50%. So he petitioned the city to install signs. They did, and then he measured the data. But like, you don't have to go do that. But like,
that's cool.
just to show you that the data is there, whether it's government data, or just plain open source data. Go download some, figure out how to load it into a database, play with it, model it, learn some Python, Google and Stack Overflow until you can't anymore. Because there really isn't a recipe for how to become a data scientist, right? It's just infinite amount of curiosity, and some technical chops that can be learned. I think there's enough opportunity out there that there's no limiting factor there.
Yeah, and I love your example, just being creative, like looking for issues in your own city, solving an issue, solving a problem, business problem, or even a problem that you see in culture, like this individual who solved this parking ticket issue and found a very creative way of helping to reduce parking tickets. That's brilliant.
Yeah, he wrote a blog about it at the end of the day, right? And I'm like, okay, if we needed someone in Chicago, I'd totally send this guy an email.
Yeah, that is so cool.
But no, it was fun.
That's awesome. Well, Adam, thank you so much for being our guest in Data Talk. It was awesome chatting with you, and hope we can do this again in the near future.
Definitely. Thank you for having me. It was really a pleasure.
Awesome. Thanks, Adam.
All right. Have a good day. Bye.
Bye.